How is it going, everybody? My name is Copyright, and today we are going to break the matter. You wonder how? Let's check it out. You remember Mono White, aka Milky Smooth version 420? Boom, gone. How about Dimir Control? Boom, gone. Oh, and don't forget Easy and Easy Dragons.
Hello, motherfucker.
Boom, bye. Of course, the same is true for Gruul, Dimir Zombies, Delver Decks, and Live Gain Decks. Yes, this deck has it all, and in today's video we are not gonna have the gameplay part at the end of the video because I spent a lot of times collecting all these clips for you, but I also think it's more important to break down the deck, that we can check out the synergies more in the detail and how everything works. If you are of course interested in the gameplay scene, let me know down in the comments. I will cut them all together. I still have all my games on the hard drive, and I will put a separate video out for it where you can check out how I was playing against each other deck or each other type, so you can maybe have a better understanding of it. With that being said, before we're gonna break down the video, guys, I wanna remind you, please support my channel, subscribe to my channel, like this video for more amazing decks like this. But for now, let's get right into it and check out our synergies and our cards that we are using for. I was working really long on this type of deck because I wanted to have an answer almost for everything. There are some weaknesses that I will be talking later on, but for the current meta, it's just an amazing tool, an amazing deck, and instantly fall into my heart. I keep on playing with it, I keep on winning with it in the current standard and keep on climbing, so I'm gonna reach my mythic most likely by today, latest tomorrow, but otherwise, let's check it out. So we have our Eaten Alive, of course, for 1 mana, just an amazing removal. I also featured it in some of my previous decks, and I cannot mention it more than enough that this card is just a great tool against all sort of snow decks that rely on Blood on the Snow. How often I had games where I exiled with my Eaten Alive opposing Liliana, the Professor, or the Loth, where the opponent just has nothing else to bring out of the graveyard and to use it against us. More often than not, it resolves in an instant concede from my opponent because he knows from there on there is no way out of it. So just a great tool. Also, as I said, 2 off is enough. If you draw it in the late game for 5 mana, you can easily exile a planeswalker or creature, or in the early game you can use some of your cheap creatures to get rid of their planeswalkers or their bigger creatures. Then we have another 1-drop with our Forsworn Paladin, just a great 1-drop that can really fast escalate in a lot of damage, like 7-9 damage into the face with Menace. Is really good against control, but also against more aggressive type of decks. You can stay back and maybe provide a chump blocker, or maybe even provide some creature with Death Touch and take out a bigger creature. 3, is it necessary? Not really. You can also go with 2, so if you don't have all the wild cards or the copies of this card, take 2, maybe increase some other copies. The last 1-drop in our deck is our Falconwrath Pitfighter, a great inclusion from Innistrad, a vampire warrior, comes for 1 mana as a 2/1 and has a little bit of subtext. For 2 mana you can discard a card, sacrifice a vampire and draw 2 cards. You can only activate it if opponent loses life this turn, but this is not a big deal because opponent loses a lot of life with this deck. And more often than not you can use it on herself, so if you need some additional cards and you can sacrifice her just get a little bit more cards in it and maybe provide more board pressure. Yeah, then let's check out our 2-drops, and these 2-drops are specifically picked to counter the current meta, so here is more focus on all these easy decks and all these mono white decks, and we go here off with 2 of our Hermit. I also featured it in some of my decks, just a great tool against easy to disturb their curve, also just to be a constant threat. You can always go for 2 damage if they don't answer it. If they wanna answer it, they need to spend some removal or some other instant and sorceries to deal with it, so this is also just a really good inclusion against all these control decks. The same is true for our Spectral Adversary, an amazing flash creature that if an opponent deals with something and you can just skip the turn, and often easy decks thinks that our Grix deck has some counters, and I had counters in the beginning, but I will talk about it later. They don't want to play something, and if they don't want to play anything, you can just bring it in, maybe phase out an opposing creature that maybe can be a blocker, and then just go in for damage. Also really good. Of course, we have some spot removal here with Infernal Grasp, destroy target creature and you lose 2 life for 2 mana. Pretty good, not more than 2, because sometimes life can get short, especially against more aggressive decks, but often than not, this comes in the right time, in the right place. Then we have another adversary, our Tainted Adversary, and he's also a great tool against mono green, mono white, just because he has Death Touch. He can block a lot of things for 2 mana, 2/3 is great. He can block all these 2 powered creatures without any problems, or maybe make a trade against a mono green deck that is not so favorable for our opponent, and we don't really lose a lot. And against control, if it comes late game, you pay 3 extra mana, he gets a 1/1 counter and create 2 zombie creature tokens that you can again use or for facial massage, or just to exile with your, or sacrifice with your Eaten Alive to exile some creatures or some planeswalkers. 2 off, I think not more, because as soon as you get more, you start having him in the opening hand, and you don't really want to open with him. Of course, against maybe more aggressive type of decks, you can bring him on turn 2, but we have other things to do on our turn 2, so more than 2 I don't recommend. And then our 3rd adversary, of course, from our red list, the Bloodthirsty Adversary, also Vampire. Maybe if you need, you can use it with a Pit Fighter, but this card, 1 off, I would love to have 2 off, but I don't want to spend my wild card, so if you have it, surely just put 2 off and maybe remove 1 of the Paladin, put 2 off Bloodthirsty Adversary, because she has huge synergy in this deck, not only for card advantage but also for removal. And she says she's 2 mana for a 2/2 with haste, and whenever she enters the battlefield, you can pay additional 3 mana to put a 1/1 counter on her, and as more you pay for this 3 mana, as more you put counters on it, but also you exile up to that many instant or sorceries from your graveyard with mana value 3 or less, and then you copy them and cast them without paying the mana cost. And let's check here out what sorceries and instants we have. First of course, we talked already about Infernal Grasp, Eaten Alive. This is maybe not the best targets, but check this out. Expressive Literation, 4 off. Imagine what's happening, and I have a game. I just top decked the adversary, played her for +2 with 3 mana, so I can take out 2 instant or sorceries, get Expressive Literation going, get a card advantage, and just take over the game. Just amazing card. Next instant and sorcery, of course, we have our Bloodline Curling, and this card, we can cover it as a really, let's say, underplayed removal that is also not that against a lot of different decks. Blood Curling just deal with all of these tokens, but also as a spot removal, you can easily use it against all sorts of dragons. -5 is more often enough against any sort of creatures that is currently played, so you can remove it. But also again, the synergy here with Bloodthirsty Adversary, Bloodline Curling is just a great card. You can bring her in for with 5 mana opening, bring her in as a hasty creature, remove maybe a blocker with -5/-5 for free, and then go in for a facial massage. So as easy as it can be, right? And yeah, this is so far for our 2 drops, and we already covered our 3 drops. I mean, Literation, I think the most of you should know by now. Then the 3 drops, we have here also a really cool card, a graveyard hate card, let's say, the Graveyard Trespasser or the Graveyard Glutton. And this creature is just great to keep you a little bit alive, because you always get 1 life if you exile a creature card from a graveyard, and you can also exile it from your graveyard. If in the late game you know that you don't need your creatures in the graveyard, you can start exiling your own graveyard and gain some life with it, so we can constantly provide some pressure and opponent needs to deal with it in a different manner, in a different fashion. Then we have our Florian. Card advantage pure, I use it more often than not for just only this purpose. Sometimes he can also be an amazing blocker, of course, because he has first strike, he blocks all the Faceless Heavens, he blocks all the creatures that have toughness 3 or less, really good, so you can just keep him on the board, play on time. If you're playing against aggressive decks, play your time with him and just draw some cards over time, just great tool. Then one of my favorite cards in the current standard, I talked about this card already a lot. I love how it interacts, I love how it ramps, I love how it gives you card selection every time it becomes day and night, and you can, for 3 mana and tap, you can make it day or night and select more of the cards that you needed. Great tool against control. If you want, let's say you don't need all the removals, you can discard them and keep all your cards that provide pressure. If you're playing against aggressive decks, it ramps you on turn 4 into your turn 5, or just provides you with a lot of mana where you can double spell easily on turn 4. So yeah, great card. I just recommend everybody craft at least 2. More than 2 are not necessary because it's legendary. It doesn't play as a big role, because if you have it on a board and you draw another one, you can just discard it with a Celsius, so you have a card selection again. Then we have our Kolaus Blood Mage, maybe also not so often used. I also have only 1 of it, and I put it as an experiment, but he come out really good, because doesn't matter when you draw him and how you draw him, early game, late game, opening hand, you always have some sort of value. So let's see what he does. It's 3 mana for a 2/1, not great stats, but what he does is, when he enters the battlefield, you can choose 1, and this is create a 1/1 black pest creature token that when it dies you gain 1 life, obviously. Then second mode is you draw a card and lose 1 life, so you get some card advantage, or you exile target's player graveyard. So if there is some easy turns or some other shenanigans where they include a graveyard, like this Azorius, flashback control type of decks, just exile everything, just gun, and then they can devote it as much as they want. This counter spell for 4, where they get 3 or 4 cards out of the graveyard and put it in the library. Just exile all of them, right? Just exile the whole graveyard, and then they literally mill themselves. So just a great card. Also against aggressive decks, he comes in as a 2/1 body, creates a 1/1 creature that also is a chump blocker or maybe a trader, and also gives you life, just great. And against control, he is a 2/1 body, and you can draw a card, lose 1 life against control. More often than not, it doesn't really matter, right? So cool card. One off, I don't want to have him too often. Maybe you can run 2 off, I don't know what you will take out for it. I'm really happy with the rest of the cards, but maybe again, if you have too many paladins, you don't have any adversaries, take him +1, paladin -1, easy exchange. Then of course, an amazing tool, as I already talked before, our Meta Hook. And Meta Hook is great in controlish, but also in aggressive type of decks, because whenever they remove something, they lose some life. So just also great, and amazing how often mono white scoops here. If you drop your meat hook on turn 4, turn 5 for -2, -3, let's say in 95% of the games, the mono white deck just scoop, because they have maybe 1 card in their hand, maybe a Faceless Heaven on the board, and Faceless Heaven is not a big deal with this deck, but then they scoop, they literally just scoop. Then another 4-drop, and I include this as a 4-drops because he's for 3, but more often than not you play him on 4, because on 3 we have other more important stuffs to do. Maybe to ramp a little bit, maybe to provide a bigger blocker or start a day-night cycle, or with Florian an amazing first striker. So on 3 we have something else to do. Usually I play him on turn 4, turn 5, depends when you draw him and when you have him. Also the same is true for the mid hook. You want him to play on turn 4, turn 5, so you can -2, -3 at least. Then our 4-drops. Moonveil Regent, amazing card advantage, amazing creature, and because we are 3 colored, also when he dies he has the ability, if you read it on the bottom, when Moonveil Reggie dies, it deals X damage to any target, where X is the number of colors among permanents you control. So with this deck it can be up to 3 damage, easily. Let's say you have Adversary or Hermit on the board, and then you have Florian on the board, or some other stuffs with red and black, for example. Wait, here, black. You easily deal 3 damage. We also have our Orcus, we will talk about it later, but 3 damage to the face or to a creature, take out a creature, is great, right? And also he provides you card advantage. You play him on turn 4, maybe you're empty-handed or have just some lands in the hand, you can play something, discard your hand, draw a card, discard your hand, draw a card, and repeat. So great card advantage for all sorts of decks, also 4/4 body flying. Great tool against Elite Spellbinder or Red Dane, so really good card. Then we have one of Orcus, the Prince of Death. I tried at beginning 2 off, but then I figured out that I draw him more often than not in a situation where I don't need him, because usually against control he is great because you can return X target creatures with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. And there is a small difference to Agandam's Awakening, the black land where you pay 3 and X to return creatures with different mana value. Here you can return the same cards all over again too. So you don't need to return 1 for 1, 1 for 2 mana, 1 for 3 mana. You can return, let's say you pay 4, you can return 2 times 2 mana, right? You can return the adversaries, you can return maybe 2 of your, like 1 paladin, 1 fighter, or 2 fighters and 1 adversary. So this is a really versatile, and then they gain haste. So against control, if they tap out, and usually you play him when they tap out, against control this card is amazing, but also against aggressive decks, where he can come in and say, the first mode says each other creature, so except of him, your creatures and opponent's creatures gain -X until end of turn, and you lose X life. So let's say you draw him on turn 6 or 7, you have maybe your Celsius in play, so you have 8-9 mana, you can easily make it for -3, -4. It's like a mini mid hook, just in this case you lose also a little bit of life from you, but you can sweep a board again, you have a 5/3 flyer on the board, and you can just take over the game from there. Great card, I recommend it definitely. And then we go to our last card in this deck, and this is Loth, the Spider Queen, just because she's an amazing tool again against all sorts of decks, mid-range, control, aggro. Whenever you bring her, she provides you just pure value. Again, life gain here, the loss, sometimes a little bit on the dangerous side, but more often than not with the mid hook and with our Graveyard Trespasser. Life is okay, so you can always gain a life, lose a life, gain a life, lose a life, so it's okay there. And yeah, who doesn't know her, I definitely recommend to read the card to get known with it. To the mana base, this mana base I'm so proud of because it's so clean and so nice to play. I played maybe about 20 games, maybe 16 to 20 games, I don't know right now, sure. I never had a game where I had a difficulty to cast something, where I had difficulty with the mana, because the mana is just amazing. In this deck the mana is so good, even if we play 3-colored deck, I never had issues with it. So let's check it out. We have 2 islands because we are on blue sides. You see, maybe we are really low, so we don't need so much blue mana. We have 3 swamps and 3 mountains, of course, as our basic lands. Just if opponent will run things like Field of Ruin and stuff, where you need to search up a basic lands, this is a good possibility. And then we have our dual colors and also our pathways with our Shipwreck Marsh, of course, pathway blue and red, pathway for Rakdos for red and black, and of course the Haunted Reach for black and red. Because we are mainly in black and red, you see we have here the pathways and the reach, everything covered, so the mana base is just amazing. There is the other pathway, the Dimir color pathway in blue and black. You don't really need it. Because, as I said, blue is just a sub color in it. You can add it if you have maybe all 4 of them, but then you have maybe difficulties with your basics, but you can try it out. And before we finish up all this review, I want to show you also the sideboard, because I was intent also playing this maybe in best of 3, and I also were experimenting with some cards, and these cards I found really helpful, and also really amazing sideboard cards in best of 3 options. You can add a little bit more of different cards if you think you need maybe more of Orcus, or you want to add the Professor, the Liliana in the sideboard against more control type of matches is also nice, because you have enough instants or sorceries where you can drain the opponent or maybe even do some other broken things. But for the sideboard, we have, as I said, 2 of Cinderclasm just against mono white, mono green less, because they are often out of reach. From turn 2 upwards they have only 3-4 toughness creatures, so here Cinderclasm is maybe not so useful, but against mono white, against all these token decks and stuff like this, Cinderclasm amazing. It's an instance, it's 2 mana, and then you deal 1 damage to all the creatures, and if you kick it for 3 mana, so you pay 2 and kick for 1, altogether 3 mana, again instant speed, so you can do it on opponent's turn, wait what he provides to the board, and you kick it, it deals 2 damage to everything. Great tool against aggressive decks. Go blank, amazing card. Don't sleep on this card against all sort of easy decks, so if you have some other decks that you wanna run in and you wanna be successful against easy decks and all these graveyard decks, Go blank, amazing tool. Discard 2 cards, exile all the graveyard, great stuff. Nighthawk Scavenger, I was running 2 of them at the beginning, but then I decided, because my 3 drops were, let's say, less aggressive, more defensive, I exclude him, but still a great addition against all sort of aggro decks, especially against mono green. Against mono green, you can surely, if you encounter a lot of mono green decks, take Nighthawk Scavenger. He will be a powerhouse. You can trade with creatures, he provides you with life, he provides you with a flyer that mono green cannot easily block, and you have enough possibilities to put something in the graveyard or have something in the graveyard, so you have him at least on like 4 or 5 power, so you gain each turn 5 life, 5 life, 5 life with lifelink. So just yeah, great card for all these mono green decks, but also against other aggressive decks, great tool. Then I have 2 negates. I was considering to run negates first, but then I thought, hey, I don't want to really sit there and don't use my mana, wait until opponent does something, and if opponent like easy turns do something, they usually do it on turn 8, turn 9, where they can copy the Epiphany multiple times, and negate is not so useful. Yeah, you can deny maybe 1 turn of Epiphany, but they still has it, so they can flash back it in the next turn, like when you, let's say you counter the copy spell, right? I forgot it now the name, for 2 mana, where you copy the next instant or sorcery, you counter it, they still have a turn, they have it in the graveyard, they can flash back it for 3, so they in the next turn they untap and then again play the flashback side and then copy something again. So negate was like and if you counter one Epiphany with it, yeah, they still have a turn, and they still can do some broken stuffs in the other turn, like bring out, I don't know, 2 Goldspan Dragons or something, and then just kill you. So I decided to cut this card out of the main deck, especially for best of 1, but if you're playing best of 3, definitely take video in. Maybe also this counter spell, let me see it fast for you, for 2 mana, where you exile, it's an instant, exile the target instant or sorcery, but also exile it from the hand, and then general vulnerability, library, test of talents. We can even add some here, maybe 1 or 2 copies of it. So if you encounter a lot of control decks, by the way, this is the card, I see it here now, this is the card, the Devious Cover Up that I meant before, if they make some graveyard shenanigans to exile it. Yeah, so this so far for the sideboard. You can add a lot of other things, as I said, depends against what you're playing and how you're playing. You can add maybe more copies of Eaten Alive to your deck, or more copies of creatures that you want to provide with early aggression against more controlish type of decks. Maybe you can go this path. Otherwise, yeah guys, this is so far for the deck. As I said, I'm really happy with the performance. I'm really proud of this deck, because I spent a lot of time to build it, to test it, for multiple days with multiple inclusions and exclusions. So this is my final version. This is definitely what I play right now on the ladder and what I will keep playing, because it's just great. It's just great. It's so satisfying to see people scooping that play the the meta decks. They net deck something out of the internet that performed in World Cup or somewhere, other pro player perform great, and they net deck it and they think, okay, now we're gonna run over the ladder and rank up really fast, and then suddenly you come with this and you literally destroy them. You literally just destroy them. It breaks all the time, these things. The weaknesses of this deck, I wanna cover it fast. Weaknesses definitely go white decks. So if opponent plays something like, I don't know, Landfall or humans, this Celestial Humans, that is also pretty favorable. As soon as they go really wide and you don't have really a good trade target or a good blocker, then you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose these games. Live game deck, sometimes 50-50, depends how your hand is and how they draw. Against live decks, it's also okay-ish, let's say, but I lost, I think, the only games I lost, I'm telling you, it's against Landfall, Celestial Landfall, definitely the one with the enchantment, and the one with the creature that makes all the time 1/1 creatures when land comes into the plate, and they have Rent 7 and they have Chariot. There I lost because they go white, you don't have enough blockers, they put a 1/1 counter on everything with the enchantment, and then they suddenly are 3/3s, 4/4s with Vigilance, and then you're most likely gonna lose. But you need to lose against something, right? A deck cannot be perfect, you cannot have a 100% win rate against everything, but everything else, if you are tired of the meta, try this out. The link will be in the description for this deck for mobile players and for everybody else. And on this spot, guys, thank you so much for watching, thank you for your time and all the support, and I hope I see you in the next one. Ciao.